Okay, are we ready to go? Hi everyone, my name is Paul Hawkins. Welcome to this session on accessibility in music. I work for a charity called Attitudes is Everything, and I'm going to introduce what we do in just a second. With me today, we've got Michael from the Garage, and we've got Louise from DF Concerts. They're going to be speaking in a bit. I feel particularly for Michael, because Michael's got to sit through me and Louise before he comes. He's got a while to sit there and kind of, before he gets to do his bit. But so what's going to happen in today's session? It's obviously on accessibility in music. We're going to talk about Attitudes is Everything and how we can help audiences, how we can help artists, how we can help professionals, how we can help venues, festivals, and the music industry as a whole. We're going to find out about Transmit and how Transmit has become an accessible venue and what DF Concerts do. But the Garage, actually, what Garage is going to talk about is accessibility in general. I've mentioned autistic customers, but actually I think you're talking about access in general. And I'm going to talk at the end a bit about language, because sometimes people can be nervous about that. There'll be plenty of time at the end for questions, I hope. I've said that with a certain degree of confidence I maybe don't quite have. Just quickly before I start, in case you missed it, yesterday my colleague Rich, who's our artist event manager, did a presentation, a Just Ask campaign, which you can watch back on after the event. All these sessions are being filmed. Last year we did a session, actually that was 2020, we did a session called Hello to Normal Land, which was a session with disabled artists, and that's watchable back on YouTube as well. Today's session is going to be recorded, so if you've got friends or colleagues who missed this, or if you just want to watch back the highlights or whatever else, you can do so afterwards. And so I'll start off by talking about Attitudes is Everything. So we are a UK-based, UK-wide charity. We work to connect deaf and disabled artists, audiences and professionals with the music industry. And when we talk about disabled people, we also include people who are neurodivergent, people who've got physical health conditions, people who've got long-term health conditions, essentially anyone who could be considered disabled under the Equality Act. And I'm going to talk about the different ways that we work with them, and we work with the music industry. We've been going since the year 2000. The whole ethos of the charity basically is to be supportive to the music industry and support them to get it right. Our founder, Suzanne Boyle, created the charity in the year 2000 after having a lot of inaccessible experiences in the 1990s at gigs and festivals. And her starting point was that venues and festivals do want to get it right, but don't know how to do so. So we wanted to give them advice about doing that. So what we did was had disabled audiences go into events, giving feedback, and then we'd go to production companies, to venues, to festivals, and say, these are the barriers people are reporting, what are the solutions to these? And we'd find solutions to the barriers people faced. So we work in a few different ways. We've got a live events access charter. That's our main tool for working with venues and festivals, and improving access for audiences. So my colleague Gideon works with around 200 venues and festivals signed up to our charter, including Transmit, which Louise is going to be talking about later, which is the only, we're pretty sure, the only gold festival in Scotland. And Transmit do some great work, which Louise is going to talk about. So in addition to our work with audiences, we've also got a project called Beyond the Music. Now that's the one which I run myself, and that's around getting more professionals working in the music industry. So it's looking at any role in the music industry, from A&R to managers to lighting engineers, sound engineers, to backstage roles and office roles in music companies. It's making sure that anyone who has an access requirement can work in any job they want to do in the music industry. And we've obviously got some work to do around that, but we produced a accessible employment guide in 2021, and we're basically working with the music industry to become more accessible. And we've got a network as well for any current or aspiring music industry professional with any kind of access requirement can join our network for support and to find out about opportunities. We're funded by Arts Council England, Paul Hamlin, and the National Lottery Community Fund. We've got also, I've managed to miss a slide for our Next Stage project, which Rich was talking about, and that's not a deliberate slight against Rich. That's a slide mysteriously going missing, so I apologise for that. But our Next Stage project works with artists, and it's basically about, again, we've got a network for artists, but we also do work with funders, for example, to make sure that when disabled artists apply for funding for touring, that they can apply for access funds as well. And we've got our Just Ask campaign, which Rich was promoting yesterday. And our Just Ask campaign is basically saying to venues, to festivals, to promoters, when you're booking artists, make it a default thing to ask if people have got access requirements rather than people having to volunteer that themselves. And we're going to show some stats now that explain why that's important. So there's 14.6 million disabled people in the UK. So again, this is anyone who could consider themselves disabled under the Equality Act. So that's often people think of wheelchair users, partly because the international sign for accessibility is that symbol of the wheelchair user, which you see on parking spaces, accessible toilets. And obviously, access for wheelchair users is important. But at the same time, not all disabled people are wheelchair users, not all disabled people have visible impairments. So it's trying to look at making sure you're meeting the access requirements for what's in effect 1 in 6 of the population. Of that 14.6 million, 9% of all children have some form of impairment, 21% of all working age adults, and 42% of all pension age adults. And just for a degree of comparison, 21% of working age adults are disabled, but the music industry, I've got 2 different stats. One of them is from Arts Council England, who found the organisations they support, music-wise, only 1% of staff reported being disabled. But then also, there was a UK music survey last year which found 11% of people who filled out their diversity survey were disabled. But of course, that could be about who's actually filling out a diversity survey, and certainly even with 11%, we're talking about the fact the music industry is massively underrepresented in terms of disabled staff. Now, part of that is because of a lack of representation. Part of that is because people with non-visible impairments may not be confident revealing that if they're not confident that that will be received well. And certainly from the research we've done, people who work in the music industry are more likely to conceal an impairment than in other industries, partly because people are freelancers, people are in relatively insecure employment, and obviously you don't want to say that you've got access requirements if you fear that that's going to be kind of judged negatively. So that's a real perception shift that we need. A stat here, which is slightly grammatically badly phrased. 70% of disabled artists have withheld details of a health condition from a promoter, venue or festival. So when we did some surveys of our artists in 2019, I think, 70% said that they'd withheld details because they weren't confident reporting them. 51% of disabled employees in the music industry have withdrawn from job application process because it wasn't accessible. So more than half, which potentially means that music industry organisations are missing out on very, very capable staff because they're not getting to the point of applying for the job because a barrier has occurred before the application has gone in or before the interview. 67% of disabled artists have had to compromise their health or well-being to perform live. So 67% of artists have chosen, potentially, in some cases it's promoters not meeting requirements. Sometimes people have decided they'd rather have an inaccessible experience that compromises their health or well-being than to risk saying to a promoter that they've got access requirements and then be negatively treated. And it's not necessarily that we're saying people will be negatively treated, but people often will have experienced, disabled people will have experienced some form of discrimination at some point and won't know they're not going to be discriminated against, so therefore may not say they've got access requirements due to the fear of the response, which is again is why we are Just Ask campaign encourages people to ask the question and encourage people to know that they can raise it. 69% of disabled employees who didn't disclose their impairments believe they're putting their own health and safety at risk at work as a result of that. So this is from Harbourside Management, a Bristol-based artist management agency, did some research with the Arts Council last year of disabled people in the music industry and found out that of the disabled people who weren't disclosing their impairments, 69% believed they were putting themselves at risk. But still, again, chose not to disclose their impairments due to the fear of consequences, which I think's quite a startling stat. We've got 2 videos we've made recently, which I'm not going to play now due to technological limitations of myself, to be completely honest. But there are 2 videos which we will which you can find via the Attitudes is Everything Twitter feed. These are videos for our Beyond the Music campaign. And these are, one video is aimed at the music industry to get more, to encourage the music industry to engage with getting more disabled people to work in the industry. And the other one is aimed at disabled people who might want to join the network. But the key thing I want to stress here is that we've got our Beyond the Music network. If you know disabled people who want to work in the music industry, please do encourage them to sign up, direct them to the attitudeseverything.org.uk website, or email me. My email address is quite easy to find. It's paul@attitudeseverything.org.uk. As long as you remember our website name and the fact my name's Paul, you can hopefully, you can get my email. So please do get in touch with us. And similarly, anyone in the music industry who wants to learn how to make the organisation more accessible, please get in touch. So we've got our Accessible Employment Guide. This came out in 2021. Again, it's downloadable from our website. And this is basically, the aim of it is, I don't know if anyone's ever seen the Government Disability Confidence Scheme. I'm not knocking the Government Disability Confidence Scheme, but one of the things we're conscious of is that if you download their guidance, there's a lot of guidance and it can be potentially overwhelming, particularly because we know a lot of music industry organisations don't have their own HR departments, and potentially huge amounts of guidance we felt might sort of make people slightly fearful or slightly intimidated or not sure where to start. So the Accessible Employment Guide is designed to be the opposite of that. And the aim basically is to give people steps to get started being more accessible right now. So basically we're trying to make the process straightforward as possible, give you some practical tips. It's been downloaded 750 times so far. It's aimed at the music industry, but is also being used in the charity sector and the finance sectors and the video games industry, which is quite exciting, the video games industry. That was quite cool when someone got in touch with that. But anyway, so that's, not that the music industry isn't cool, obviously, but that was, so that's our Accessible Employment Guide. We've also got a Future Leaders programme, and being slightly kind of transparently honest, one of the reasons I'm really excited to talk about this conference and to be in Scotland is because we've got this Future Leaders programme where we're trying to support 11 disabled people who are at the beginnings of their career but have got the potential to be leaders, to work in the industry, and doing some structured support over 10, 11 months. We want a future leader in Scotland. We've got funding for a placement in Scotland from a company in Scotland. We've got work we want to do, and we're yet to recruit a future leader in Scotland. So if you know disabled people who want to work in the music industry in Scotland who'd be interested in joining our network, please put them in touch with us, because we're really keen to get a future leader from Scotland. And that's something I wanted to make very clear, and hopefully I have. So obviously I could talk all day about the things that we do, but I think what's important is what the music industry is doing. And ultimately, I don't know if anyone's heard this before, but theoretically, the aim of any charity is to not exist. And that might sound slightly strange, but essentially any charity exists because there's a problem and something that's not happening, which should be happening. And ultimately, as a charity, what you're ultimately trying to do is get to a point where you don't need to keep campaigning for something because that thing you're campaigning about is already in place. So ultimately, we do what we can to support the music industry, but where we want to get to is the music industry putting great initiatives in place. And I'm really excited that Louise and Michael are here with me today for that reason, because ultimately what festivals do, what venues do, what the music industry does, ultimately, if we can get to a point where the music industry is accessible for everyone, then, we don't need to campaign about it anymore. We can can go off and do something else instead, and I love my job, but at the same time, I'd love there to be that level of inclusion where we didn't need to kind of bang this drum. So we're going to start off with Louise. Michael will talk afterwards. So I might have a slightly perfunctory slide coming up next, or I might be straight on to Louise, but Louise is from DF Concerts. She'll obviously introduce herself. Oh yeah, I have got that perfunctory slide. There we go. But after that, I will hand the clicker over and hand over to Louise.